Some of the best work we've all done here on the call has been in situations where we're relaxed, right? We don't feel that pressure. We don't feel like something's going to be judged if I don't go in the right direction. And when you have that ability to feel that calmness go over you, you're able to make some of the best decisions. You're able to make it with some more authority and with confidence. And that's what I always teach those new leaders is take your own shackles off and be who you are.
This is Revenue Makers, the podcast by 6 Sense investigating successful revenue strategies that pushed companies ahead.
So Simon, what do you think it would be like to have worked at Salesforce, Salesforce.com, right before their IPO? They're under $100 million and you're selling right next to Mark Benioff.
I mean, that's crazy. Imagine telling a David and Goliath story and Salesforce not being the Goliath in that story.
Well, today's guest is Chris Lee. He's a CRO of Zilliant, who's actually a CPQ software platform, but his background is exactly that. He was at Salesforce in the early days. He was at Siebel. He was at DocuSign before all these companies were the companies that they are now. And he's got some pretty amazing stories and insights. And he talks about capturing lightning in a bottle, and he takes it with him in terms of how he builds his next team. So what a great conversation today about team building, success, and failure.
And I think, just having had those experiences, for him to take those learnings and do it again and again and again at the next series of companies, I think there's a whole lot of learning for us in just hearing what makes a great team and hearing how to hire the right people and hearing how to promote the right people and establish the right culture. It was just really unique and an interesting perspective.
Absolutely. So let's dive into this conversation. There's a lot to learn here.
Let's do it.
Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Really looking forward to the conversation today. So just to throw a baseball bat right at you, because why not? You have this background of having been at some pretty amazing companies in the early days, Salesforce, Siebel, and I can't even imagine the learnings from taking those companies from sub $100 million and being on these journeys with them. As you're continuing on in this career of yours, which is epic, I would say at this point, what are some of the learnings or some of the things you've taken with you? Like if you harken back to those days at Salesforce, for example, that you apply even now, if you were to move even into a new role or if you're building a new team, like what goes with you? Because I can't even imagine there must be so much.
Oh, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. And it's these type of questions and conversations that I love to have because it takes me back in time to those really special moments. And to answer your question, Adam, I think that the things that come with me as I move through my career, I think the learning points are companies like Siebel Systems, Salesforce.com, DocuSign. These are all organizations that when you're with a company in the early stage, you get to see the potholes. You get to understand what is it that you can't solve because you don't have the dollars or the resources, and you figure it out. So when you run into an issue or a challenge, suddenly it's more about, hey, what can I do to solve it on my own versus let me call this division of the company and hope I can get 10 people to jump in or a partner or so on and so forth. So it's those learning experiences that you respect as you go through and go into some of these other organizations that you can learn from those and you can put them into action in some of the more global companies that I start to work with. And they're learning experiences that helps you understand what your capabilities are as an individual. And it's not always the sky is falling. You always know that there's a way out of it.
Yeah. And that's so great. And I feel having had the experiences that you've had, do you find that when you're jumping into a new role, it's like, okay, all over again, like the same principles are a thread through each of them. It's about getting a great team in place, great sellers, great culture. Like, how do you really go about building that?
Simon, great question. It's almost like you have this blueprint. There's this idea of trying to capture lightning in a bottle of what I experienced at Salesforce early stage pre-IPO. And it's that blueprint of what was it that made that company so great? Why for 10 years, nobody left the organization. And it was a lot about building a team that believed in each other, that helped each other, that really wasn't about playing politics. It wasn't about backstabbing to try to figure out how one can look better within the organization. It was really about this David versus Goliath kind of mentality where you brought folks in that we had a common enemy, which was the big 800-pound gorillas at the time, which were Siebel and Oracle and Vantiv and Clarify and Microsoft. And you really came together as a group to try and win. And that's all you were really trying to do was win. And there was so much pride in doing it. And it's something that as I've continued to grow and move into different positions and different organizations, and there is a recipe, but if you have one of those pieces that's ever so slightly off, you can't capture that lightning in a bottle. But even if you get 90% there, you're still a lot better than anyone else that hasn't grown up and experienced it.
It reminds me of the saying that we have internally at Sixth Sense, and it permeates everything. You gotta wanna. And if we can find more people who will hold on tight to that, we're going to be great.
Yeah. And it's also bringing in folks that haven't been through that experience yet, that you can see that excitement on their face. They have the hunger to want to do great things. And it's also being able to bring folks in to the company that they haven't experienced big success yet. And they want to learn. They're hungry to learn. And there's something in their why. Like, why do they do it every day? And there's something in them that's driving them. And you want to also embrace that. And it's a special type of person. But when you see them, you'll know that's who they are. And that's who I bring into each one of those organizations.
If you double click a second on, we talk about the blueprint itself, right? And obviously the largest piece of that is people. What are some of the other major pieces that brought that lightning into the bottle beyond people?
It's also just the overall view or messaging coming from the top, right? It's the CEO. And they also have to have that energy, that want to succeed, but do it in a way that you're enjoying it. You're having fun with it. And I can tell you that working with CEOs like Mark Benioff and Keith Kroc when I was at DocuSign, these are folks that enjoyed the hunt, if you will. And that permeates across the entire organization, that level of energy, that level of confidence and excitement. You know, I remember two situations where one with Mark Benioff, it was classic. It was David versus Goliath. And here we were, this little company, and he takes out a page in USA Today that says, as a little boy on a blackboard saying, I will not give Siebel my lunch money. I will not give Siebel my lunch money. And then the caption was, don't be bullied by the big CRMs. It was a classic. And the response that he got from it was even better. So suddenly the publicity went through the roof of this little tiny company, which was great. The other is someone like Keith Kroc. Keith was so energetic at DocuSign. He would literally come out on a corporate kickoff and be doing high kicks of level of excitement and tell a great story about how DocuSign was, you know, he was living an experience using DocuSign and would tell this unbelievable story. And the passion that would come through was, again, just so contagious. And I think that a great company, it starts from the top. And that's one of the other key pieces of the blueprint, is making sure that you have a leader that believes in the same success for the company as you do and will back it and get behind it. And then the third piece is just making sure that you do have the right product and making sure that it is at least 80% of the way there. The other component to it of a blueprint is having people that can build the relationships with their customers and provide a white glove service. Because at the end of the day, I've been in situations where I may have had only, 75% of the feature functions of a competitor, but they knew that I would be with them throughout the entire process and the journey together. And yes, in due time, we'll have those feature functions, but they want to know that I'm in the foxhole with them. And I think being able to create that white glove service is also a part of that blueprint, so that customers understand that it's not just about product, it's about relationships. It's about those partnerships and knowing that you're with them through thick and thin, and it's a phone call away.
Absolutely. And B2B, sometimes people think it isn't so much about the people, because we've taken that C out of it. But my God, at the end of the day, we're still people buying from people, and we've got to be together in this.
It really is a game changer. The companies that do the best that I've been with and I've observed are the ones that really connect with their customers, not just in a product sense or a feature function sense, but it's really about being able to connect with them on a personal level. And I'll give you another example. I had one of my customers that typically what you do is before you go on a sales call, you'll do research. You understand who you're meeting with in the background. So I did the research and I found out that this person every morning would wake up to his 3 children and make sure that he made breakfast for them, made sure that he did his workout in the morning before they woke up. So that was the best thing I ever heard, because as soon as I walked in, we talked about running, which I love to do. We talked about my knees were hurting that morning because of the run. And I was the same way with my children and making sure that I was there for breakfast and lunch and dinner and so on and so forth. And it just connected us beyond anything a competitor could do to come in, because we had this relationship suddenly in just a matter of moments.
There's so much to unpack there, but I'm just thinking about the huge advantage that any group of people that's been in these companies has throughout their entire career. You take it with you. And I think everyone can look at their career and say, okay, there's that catalyst, or really provided such a base for everything going forward. But when you think about somebody who's sitting, maybe they're a first-time sales leader, they're a couple of years in, they haven't had that experience. They haven't captured lightning in a bottle. They haven't worked at one of these amazing startups in early stage. What's your advice to them to sort of, okay, you haven't seen it, but you want to build it, and you don't want to look at it as a disadvantage, but like you're new and you're green, and it's like, where do I go and what can I do to contribute? Maybe I can build the next blueprint myself.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would advise or coach that sales leader. For one, I'm always a big fan of having mentors, right? And I'm a big fan of making sure that as a sales leader, I'm always offering to be a mentor who has experienced it. So you can do it through a connection and relationship. And I do think having someone there for you that has experienced it will be a coach for you as you are managing for the first time. And I think it's also helpful because a lot of the sales managers in particular are moved into that role because they've been a great salesperson. But at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily equate. You could have a fantastic, amazing salesperson, but they're not necessarily a leader or a sales manager. So it's important that you do have someone that can coach you through that. That's first and foremost. And the second piece is my advice or coaching on that also is never hesitate to make a decision. You'll have wrong decisions, you'll have right decisions, but just make sure you make the decision. Don't get analysis paralysis, and just know that you can always pivot. And I think what I explain to a sales manager is take your own shackles off and allow yourself to be comfortable with who you are, and understand that you're not being judged, and that the person who's your leader above you will be there to protect you, and know that you're not being questioned over everything. And once you can see someone take their shackles off, I mean, think about it. Some of the best work we've all done here on the call has been in situations where we're relaxed, right? We don't feel that pressure. We don't feel like something's going to be judged if I don't go in the right direction. And when you have that ability to feel that calmness go over you, you're able to make some of the best decisions. You're able to make it with some more authority and with confidence. And that's what I always teach those new leaders is take your own shackles off and be who you are. Be who the person that brought you here, but be humble enough to know that you don't know everything, and leverage your mentors and leverage others within the organization. And it's never embarrassing to ask for help, because we all have been there. For some reason, everyone believes that you miraculously went into a leadership role and you didn't have to go through the learning process at all. You just were that great. Well, that doesn't happen, right? There's a couple that have it, but that doesn't always happen. That's what I would probably give as advice to any of the new sales leaders. And also, the one piece I'll also mention is don't focus on hiring people that you're friends with. It's good if they're great, but you also have to have some tough discussions and conversations. And it's comforting to know that they're around you because you know them. But at the end of the day, you also want a team that respects you for the work, not just as a friend. But it is that combination that you have to strike a nice balance with, but it is something that's something to think about.
For sure. And so, it's great, I think, that we hit on the fact that yes, hiring is crucial and getting the right people in, but even just promoting from within and bringing, I think, the folks who are exhibiting the behaviors that you want to have across the organization, like recognizing that, going beyond just the metrics. Creating a great culture is important, but then holding on to it and really cultivating it throughout is even more important. I do have a question though. I mean, you're a really successful CRO. We've talked a lot about the intangibles, but tangibly, like how are you measuring success within your team, within your reps? Like what are those metrics and those KPIs that are great indicators for you?
When you think about reps, you also have to think about it's not just about hitting a number. Everyone thinks about it's hitting a number. That's the way you build a culture around the sales folks, and that's the way you determine the best. That's really not the case. Yes, that's a component of it, but not the end all be all of it. You have to think about what it is in their career also that they're trying to get out of being in this sales role. What is it that their next step is? And I think being able to look at the sales reps that are on your team, looking at who's going over and above in the sense that really doing the extra effort to be successful. And I'll give you an example. As a salesperson, not having to rely on all the systems. What I find today is like any of the new folks coming into sales, it's like, well, I need a software package that can do this, and I need one that can let me do this. And when the reality is that it's also some of the most successful is just really doing your own research, right? Finding out about the company, knowing them better than they know themselves, and building out an organizational chart and understanding each individual and making a phone call and being personable and building that relationship. And I think a lot of that is not what happens today. So many folks are like, I need to get this software package in order to remind me to call the customer 3 times over the next 3 months. No, you don't need that. How about just picking up the phone and saying, I need to make the phone call? Or how about just a nice personal email that doesn't have to be one that's pre-written? Simple things like that go a long way. And I think when you can find a salesperson that's not only focused on how do I drive the number and hit the number, but it's how do I get there and do it? They'll find a way to do it because they want to be successful. And that's the way I would look at those sales folks and looking at what is their career path and helping them along the way. What I do is I want to make sure that I'm talking to my BDRs, my business development reps, the lower stage of the sales spectrum, because I want them to know I believe in them. They're going to work that much harder because I know their career path is they want to be in sales and then they want to be in sales leadership. And I help coach them along the way. But it's seeing those folks early stage and the hunger and being able to help promote that from within so that they can drive their career path as well. But that's what I look at is like, how does this most successful find a way to do it without using technology to do it oftentimes?
Yeah, that's funny that all this talk about AI and like, oh, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. But really, at the end of the day, like nail the fundamentals of your job and the way you get it done before you start thinking about whatever machine or software, like you said, is going to help you. Because I was at a conference a couple of months ago and like, what's the next big thing going to happen with AI in 2024? And what's your advice to people that haven't implemented or aren't using AI yet? I said, like, make sure you're actually doing your stuff right first. And yeah, obviously there's a place for AI and it's pretty remarkable what it does. But I think people just jump ahead to like, ooh, shiny object, cool toy, but did you learn how to build the toy or did you learn how to build the process first?
It's not about really anything that's going to change how you go about your business. And it's not going to eliminate what you're saying, which is you got to roll up your sleeves and you've got to be willing to get dirty and still do the basics.
Tech is great. We've all bought a ton of tech in our careers, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, it's still good selling, good marketing. And so we have this saying internally, ideas are easy, but execution is everything. And that is the one piece that is in our control. No matter where the economy is going, no matter where the budgets are going, if we are executing well and we have a North Star that we're all working towards, we'll be okay. And so talk to us a little bit, Chris, about setting that vision, setting that goal for the year, getting your reps all aligned.
Yeah. So I love what you said, Sima, on it is all about execution. But I think a lot of it also is really being a realist as to what is it that we need to do as a team. What I always like to do is I never want to make it feel like that salesperson is someone that has to do something individually. As a group, this is what we're doing. So it's being able to look at what is in front of us together as a team and march to that in one direction for 2024. So we're all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. The great thing is that now once we know how to get there, it's how do you execute? And then it's, okay, what are some of the ways that we can execute on this strategy and this plan? What do we need to do? What's the talk track to our customers? How do we leverage our own internal resources to do it? And then how do we share those best practices across North America into EMEA and vice versa, so that we're seeing different ways that they're expanding their customer base, but doing it in such a way that you're enabling the customer to be successful in what they're doing. But again, to your point, which is it is all about the execution, but it's also about putting that plan in place, that strategy for the year, and making sure we're all rowing in the same direction. We all know what we need to do to get there. It does feel a lot more like a team approach. And you can also leverage, like I said, the best practices of others that are executing faster or more volume than some of the others.
That's solid sage advice. So you've seen so much success, clearly. You've helped so many people be successful. You've been in successful companies. Let's talk a little bit about the opposite. When things go wrong. So talk a little bit about in your world with your teams, how you look at failure. And in my mind, it's sort of like, if we're not screwing up, we're doing something wrong because we're not pushing ourselves versus like, oh, okay, well, we fell down. Let's get back up. I could go on that. But like, how do you think about that with your teams?
Adam, it's going to sound crazy. I'm going to say this, but I embrace failure all the way back to my days of selling door-to-door copiers and understanding that as a new salesperson and selling copiers, that was the masterclass of selling because, man, you're walking door to door, you're freezing, the weather's changing on you, and you're being rejected everywhere you go. But the thing that I always talk to my sales folks about are always about, one, you always want to be pushing the envelope. You always want to break glass. You always want to push it so far that, yeah, you might fail. But the great thing is, and I equate this back to a Rubik's Cube. Now, Sima, Adam, you guys may be too young for a Rubik's Cube.
We know what a Rubik's Cube is.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about just taking the little pieces off and then sticking them back. But with the Rubik's Cube is a prime example of selling, right? Which is you can solve for one side, but you failed essentially. You missed all the other sides. But you then take that idea of how you got to the first one, and then you kind of make adjustments to what you did to get the first side. And now you have two. Guess what? You still failed. And then you make adjustments again. You got three, right? And this goes on and on until you finally have solved the Rubik's Cube. And then it's time to replicate it. So now you've mastered it. Now you replicate it. And I think that's what sales is all about is it's those that are willing to adjust your process, adjust your way of selling to that failure in order to get closer to success. And it's really literally spinning that Rubik's Cube until you find what that process is or what that exact winning solution is, and then you replicate it across. But failure is just something, if you welcome it and you become used to it and comfortable with it, it doesn't scare you. It doesn't frighten you. When I grew up, I was the youngest of 5 kids. I didn't grow up with anything. And to me, I wasn't afraid of the bottom. I wasn't afraid of failure because if you're coming from the bottom, there's no place else to go, right? But up. To make a decision and go, well, you're going to be back at the bottom. Well, great. Guess what? I'll embrace it and I'll bring myself back up again. Having that mentality of I'm not afraid to break glass. And back to my point, which was I'm not afraid to take the shackles off. I'm not afraid of someone judging me because I made the wrong decision. And if you have a leader or a manager above you or working with you that's not putting that pressure on you, I'm telling you, failure is brilliant. It will help you embrace everything that you need to do to get closer to success. And that's, I think, absolute recipe for a great salesperson.
Absolutely. Some of the best learnings come from those darkest moments, frankly, because that's where you're really innovating and figuring out the best path forward. Chris, let's talk a little bit about sales in the sense that going beyond the sale itself. Obviously, the role of the seller, particularly in complex B2B cycles, is bringing that customer along the journey, making them really successful, driving high adoption. Like, how do you train your reps to go beyond just that sale?
So, a couple of things that I think are really important. One, I don't let the sales folks walk away from a customer. It's never we closed the deal, we signed the contract, now I'm off to the next shiny penny. No. The way I look at it is that if you were there with the customer, you made commitments, you were there with them, you built the relationship. To now turn around and hand it off to someone in customer success to say, hey, now you build your own relationship. I'm over here. If they need something, you handle it. No, that's not the way we do it. You're there with a customer for life. And if you were there, you built that relationship, you need to be there from the beginning of gathering that lead to working the sales cycle to implementation, all the way through to the point where you're there at the renewal. In the SaaS world, the interesting thing is customers have choices, right? It's like, okay, that renewal is up. I can go somewhere else and get a better product or a cheaper price. And that's why you need to stay on top of being a salesperson that is helping your customer throughout the entire journey. And being able to also, yes, you'll leverage your customer success team, but it'll be a team environment that you are the quarterback of. You're the one who owns that relationship. So that has a lot to do with why I think we've been very fortunate, and I've been fortunate in my past, of having a great retention, because it's about staying with the customer, like I said, in the foxhole, and then also going back all the way through to renewal and making sure that they're constantly feeling as if you're with them. And that's why salespeople also need to do that. And I can tell you, Simon, I still have customers from 20 years ago that I'm still in contact with, exchanging holiday cards and birthdays and so on and so forth. And it's because we built trust in one another. And the only way you do that is making sure that you're with the customer throughout the entire customer journey, so that you have the customer for life, and you'll have a friend for life too, which is a bonus along the way.
So much great sage advice. We said only the only kind of advice that you serve out. We have a question that we ask all our guests as we get towards the end. It's not meant to stump you. It's not meant to throw you off your game.
If I were to go to heaven, what would St. Peter say, or what would I want him to say to me? I feel like I'm on the actor studio.
No. What's your favorite word? What's your
favorite word?
The question is, what is the most ridiculous thing you've had to do or been asked to do in your career? There's positive ridiculous and there's negative ridiculous. And we've gotten from smuggling goods to doing bad things to clients with turning off their product, all sorts of crazy things. So what do you got?
Oh my God, you're killing me. You're killing me, because I have two that come to my head and I'm like, should I say them, or should I how far can I go here? So I'll say the first one that's clean, because the second one you can always
I want to hear the second one.
You can always edit out. It's at the back end of it.
I used to say it's a family show, but I think we're beyond that at this point. So.
Yeah. So back when I was with Siebel Systems, my only account was Merrill Lynch. So you always had to have a badge. I never had a badge. So what I found a way was that, one, I ingratiated myself with the person at the front desk and they kind of knew me, but you can't always just go in every day. So I found a way that once I was in past the front desk, I knew that if you go to the bottom basement of this huge building, you could walk freely back and forth. So I literally would be in one part of asset management over here and then selling to them. And then I'd go in through a fire door down in the basement, literally where people were keeping lights on and whatever. And I would walk all the way to the other side and then pop up through another fire door. And I did this like a champ for probably almost 2 years, sold the biggest deal at Siebel Systems, one of the biggest ones ever. And it was all because I found a way to navigate under this building, and I would take my management team through there. I think we had Tom Siebel walking through one time. I still think I could do it, but there's always a way. If there's a will, there's a way. You could never tell me that I can't get in to talk to someone. I would always find a way. And I try to tell my sales folks, there's always a way. I don't care if I have to dress up and bring balloons in and act like I'm somebody who's coming in to deliver a birthday greeting. There's always a way. It may not be the best way for you, but there's always a way.
Well, there you go. Chris, thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation. I think it went places that we didn't think it would go when we first started, which is always the best type of conversation, by the way.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. It was absolutely one of the best podcasts I've been on, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. My last parting words is that for anyone that's in my position or in a leadership role is always to pay it forward. And, I think it's really important for the new generation of folks that are coming up in software and technology is to have a mentor, to have someone that they can rely on, to help them pave the way. I would have loved to have had it. And I think that anyone that's in our position, we should do that. We should do it for folks that don't have necessarily the opportunities that were presented to us, or they don't have the mentorship, or they don't have access to the right knowledge bases and so on and so forth. And I think it's really important to give back, because why do we do this, right? At the end of the day, It's about giving back. It's about putting a smile on someone's face. And I can tell you that at the stage that I'm in my career, it's not about how much money you can make and what level you can get to. I'm really happy watching somebody else buy their first home or buy their first car because of something that I was able to help them with. And I just think that my recommendation and advice for anyone that hops onto your show is that please pay it forward.
What a great way to end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Chris.
it.
Thank you, guys. It was great. Pleasure.
You've been listening to Revenue Makers.
Do you have a revenue project you were asked to execute that had wild success? Share your story with us at sixthsense.com/revenue, and we might just ask you to come on the show. And if you don't want to miss the next episode, be sure to follow along on your favorite podcast app.